Welcome. So this is our fourth session of GrailCast. I'm thrilled today to have Vanessa join us. Vanessa and I have been engaging over the years on all things legal tech, privacy, and everything in between. And I think we first met at a Tech GC event, right? I think you were a speaker there. It was can't remember where we were, like Seattle, maybe no, New York.
I think we were in New York. Yeah, we
Yeah,
did a roundtable together.
right. Yeah, it's just really impressed by Vanessa in so many different ways. Also, I will never forget your casual drop during that conversation of, yeah, I just took over the CFO role and became a finance expert, and I've never forgotten that, Vanessa. To be honest, of like that is not a small thing to just take over. So I've been looking forward to this session for quite some time. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit of an intro, and I'll do the same, and then we can get started.
Sure. So I'm Vanessa Gage. I'm the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Cedar. Cedar is a healthcare technology company, and we're focused on improving the patient financial experience of healthcare. So that ranges from making the billing experience like simple and transparent, and payment plans and other solutions to help both providers and patients. We serve about 25 million patients a year, so B2B to C model. I've
Right.
been here about 3.5 years. Before that, I was the head of legal at Open Door, which is a real estate tech company.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like you've seen different industries, different stages, different styles of growth. So I was looking forward to just your color there because I think it's you know, many folks are, they change industries and they're trying to get insights for what they can learn. So yeah, I was really looking forward to our conversation there and just your context in that kind of area. So a bit of background, if you're tuning into the GrailCast for the first time, Daniel Barber, I'm co-founder and CEO of DataGrail. DataGrail is the agentic data privacy platform trusted by companies like Databricks, FanDuel, and Restoration Hardware. So we'll get started. And so today's conversation is all about legal AI. When we were talking, Vanessa, had a passion in this area, and I feel like we're all trying to figure it out. And so, would love to keep the conversation operational, and I think you'll provide great practical guidance today. I know a lot of folks are looking for that. And so I think just, yeah, to get us started, kind of an entry question of just how are you seeing AI sort of impact your daily work, like we were talking about before, and these day-to-day tasks?
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you lock GCs in a room, people are on a wide spectrum here.
Right.
I would say, my personal perspective was I was a little bit of a late adopter of this. There was the promise of what AI could bring to the legal industry, and then as I dug in on it, it was many of the tools and even ones that were kind of already part of our tech stack. When I first got into them for legal, I was like, really, I was disappointed in them.
Yeah.
They weren't
Yeah.
able to really have the impacts that I had hoped for. But I would say over the last 12 to 18 months, it's really changed. And so, the way that they impact my day to day is I think there's now like an expectation for GCs that you are going to incorporate AI into how you build and operate your team. But what that looks like, I think, really varies across companies. From my perspective, um, it first it kind of crept into, some of the tools that we were using started to offer AI enhanced features,
Right.
whether they were agentic AI or first like, here, we'll apply your playbook to your contract markup. And so I kind of took the perspective of let me understand what the existing tools we have in our stack can do.
Right. Right.
And like what I'd say is over the last year, it's crept in more and more places into my daily life, right? And that's been probably the biggest impact that I've seen is I don't think of AI as this thing I go do anymore. AI
Mm,
is now just a part of really how I operate, and it's different depending on the task to be done. Like it starts to just become more of a daily piece of how you operate.
yeah.
And I'd say there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't use something that is an AI related tool or process in how I operate. It's like I think of it as like a boost, probably more than especially at a GC level, maybe more than it's not going to change the things that hit my plate, but it's going to change how how I respond to those things that come through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. Did the company, and I'm just more curious here, did the company adopt a standard model for use, or what did that look like? Just like,
Yeah, so here we kind of took sort of a desperate kind of viewpoint to it in terms of different teams were sort of tasked to identify AI opportunities that made sense for them.
yeah,
There are some of our tools that are used across the company. For example, we're a Google shop, so like Gemini was enabled
Gemini,
across.
yeah,
So that was the beginning, right? But then, the solutions, for example, for engineering, whether that was Cursor or that was Claude or other tools, it was really like that was where they went because those tools were the most tailored towards their needs.
yes,
So for example, people would look towards tools, the AI-enabled tools that kind of were in control of their work functions. So it's really been, we kind of took a hybridized approach for that. We did
yeah,
form an AI guild, which was sort of looking at some consolidation of AI tools. But we sort of
interesting.
started with if you first just purchase only like utilitarian tools that serve everyone's needs, you don't
Mm,
necessarily get the best tools or have the time and resources to fully like invest and explore what those are, right? You sort of end up with tools that may not really be the best tools, but
yeah,
they
not
like
best in
check the
class for
most
the
boxes.
functional need, more like general use.
Yeah, exactly. And so like within my own department, to be honest, what we were seeing is the tool stack we are like Cedar's a pretty heavy like technology tool focused kind of company. Like some companies would still be in spreadsheets, right?
Right,
We
right.
already had a pretty high tech load within the team. I think through things that we should own or just do own. We own like 30 tools.
Wow.
So to add in additional tools to my team that are AI specific was like it was going to increase the burdens, pretty significantly.
Yeah,
So I kind of took the perspective of let's understand what the tools we currently have access to, like through our CLMs and our GRC tooling and other things. What are the AI enablements that they have or they have coming on their roadmaps, and how can we leverage
yeah,
those? Like max out what's available through our tool set and determine what we really care about.
yeah.
And so that was sort of the perspective we took here of, each team for themselves to explore what AI use makes the most sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. On the things that you're excited about, and this is one, we've talked a little bit about this when we went over dinner. What are you excited about right now in terms of like for in-house teams in particular, around legal operations or even just at the GC level?
Yeah, I mean, sort of what's really, this is something I feel passionate about, right? Like I really appreciate that you publish prompts. And kind of early on, I was like, I don't frankly have time to spend time developing a 500 word prompt.
Yeah,
So I was like, what am I not doing? It's probably that, right? And
yeah,
so I have kind of, leveraged what other people have done there, but it wasn't for me. That wasn't a natural way to use AI. So what I'm really
yeah,
excited about is sort of this kind of some of them are existing companies, some of them are the new companies coming online. And what they're doing now is combining both kind of the best of the information you already have about the company. Like I'll use
yeah.
an
Like the
example, like,
contextual information
yeah,
internal to your
contextual
business.
information, like those kinds of
Yeah,
things, because that's one of the biggest use cases is like some companies have lots of wikis. We write a ton down. The trick is to find the latest, greatest and where it lives.
right.
And now those are also being combined with access to the law.
Mm,
And that was where like you mentioned GCAI, they were kind of
yeah,
early in that. Harvey has some of that,
yeah,
Claude work for the legal AI. But those are now, I think, starting to bring together your own information, the
yes,
law, and then when you ask questions, the prompting is simpler than it was in the early days.
yes, yes, yes,
Where there's one of the things I like in some of the tools is it kind of already knows how I would like information summarized or produced, so it can
yes,
mirror that, right? I don't have to really repeat that prompt. Some of those are now settings within the tools, and I
yeah.
found that was in the 500 word prompt you probably spend 100 explaining, please take this tone,
Right,
this is
right.
my audience, like those
I
kinds
mean,
of
prompting
things.
itself is kind of a skill in itself, like
Oh,
we
it
talked
really
about,
is.
right? And I think that if the tools can incorporate that, that makes the user experience substantially better.
Yeah, It does. And I'll use a kind of a recent example of like where I like for me became almost the moment where I knew I would use AI more in my daily life was I had written, um, it was actually as part of an RFI for for some legislative change. And I had done that about 2 years ago. And we were responding to something more recent. And we were going back and looking at kind of all of our prior letters. And I wanted to pull some of that information. And somebody pointed out, hey, I think some of this has changed, right? Like there
Mm,
were some legal changes in the last couple of years. There's, some legislation was passed. And I went and I asked for an explanation of everything that had changed, like kind of using my letter as the example of, can you explain to me what's changed in this legislation that might impact what I've written? And in 15 seconds, I had a really, and this legislation is like about 2,000 or 2,500 pages long.
yeah.
15 seconds, I had a summary of the parts of that legislation that had changed, and it was relevant to my question and the topic.
Wow.
And I was like, that was really like changing how I think and operate,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then
Like that's a step function change, right?
yeah,
Like what would your
that
alternative have been? Like not great.
no, right.
Uh
I would have read some law. I would have had to go read some articles from law firms. I would have had to take that, go pull the legislation, make sure it was consistent. And in this case, we're talking about enough context to get a point that is really about two sentences
yeah,
correct, right? I really
yeah.
didn't need the deep dive, and I really didn't want to go spend, the
Hours
better
upon
part of a
hours trying to
day
figure that
digging.
out.
Yeah, right. And so I think that was kind of one of those moments where I realized in this aha moment, one, my behavior was changing and how I was thinking about what I could do with AI. And two, it was actually really meeting a need for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's super cool. So we've kind of talked a little bit about this. I am curious your kind of hot take here. Like, are there any trends in sort of adoption that you think are maybe misunderstood or, even overhyped?
Yeah, and I'm one for hot takes, right? I think my hot take is there is an assumption, I think, within business and sometimes even within the legal team itself, that I'm going to put in place this tool. It's going to solve all my problems, right? The business is like, hey, if it's AI enabled, it's going to, you don't need lawyers anymore,
Right,
right?
right,
Or
right, right.
like, and for lawyers, it's like, oh, I can just go pull all this information. Here's a couple of examples to why I'm like, you know what, the tools have come a long way, but the tools are still that. They're tools.
Right, right.
One of them was we had a GRC tool that had actually a really amazing ability to complete diligence questionnaires, like the security
Hmm.
questionnaires, the other things.
Yeah.
Great. So it had this feature. First time we tested it, we fed it one good questionnaire as like its data set. Got great answers, very useful, very helpful. Well, then we let it loose on the entire like repository of our prior questionnaires.
Mm.
We got garbage.
Oh,
Because
interesting. Yeah.
the company had changed over time. Some of those questionnaires
Mm.
were completed to a high level of accuracy, right? Like, so some of them weren't. And so when you include garbage, like what I,
Yeah, you're
you
gonna
know,
get the result of garbage at
yeah,
the
you
other
kind of
end.
get garbage. And
Yeah.
everybody kind of discounts the work that goes into getting your repositories, getting your contracts organized
Yeah. Yeah.
into like the right kinds of sort of data aggregation where you get quality from them.
Right.
The same
Right.
thing is true with CLM tools where they're going to run playbooks or compare negotiation like
Yeah. If
provisions.
you've
If
changed your position on things, then
you change your
you're
position on
yeah.
things, or guess what? It's comparing your MSA against vendor because those contracts aren't properly coded
Right.
in
Right.
your database. And all of a sudden, you're not, it's not helping you. It's like, whoa, what are you doing here? And so it's like great, like, with great opportunity comes great rewards. But like, I think right now, everyone kind of discounts like how much it takes to get there to that high
Mm.
quality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't like, and I'm curious. It's one of those, I'm like, I think there's things that you can do to use AI to help, but it hasn't really replaced, like, for example, our contracts repository. Like, we had adopted a tool, we had had some of the stuff coded, but we were finding that, like, the metadata in there wasn't great. And you
Mm.
know through some of the decisions we made about how we were doing that as we got into it didn't work great, and like the tools sort of rely on still some of the foundational data.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
like
that
my
data
hot take
management
of
problem
like it just
exists
doesn't
everywhere.
replace like some amount of setup.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that data management problem is real though, because to your point, if the company has collected a large amount of like I think the assessments example is very interesting, like security questionnaires, like that type of information just gets out of date
Mhm.
so fast.
Yeah.
So I could see that that would return, you know, not exactly the output you're looking for. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and that's where, like what's the promise is I think some of the newer tools or some of the updates to the tools are starting to recognize, like initially no one really recognized that as an issue. And so,
Yeah,
on the, today's problem may not be tomorrow's problem. I think the
yeah.
tools are also starting to recognize that that is an issue. So, hey, maybe I only want to compare everything we did in the last 4 months, with more built-in
Yeah, put a time
functionality for
frame
that.
on it so that
Yeah,
then the data
exactly.
ingestion isn't bad. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah. So, you know, switching gears a little bit, I feel like this is, related, but I think I'm just like curious in the untapped opportunities. So just, the vantage point you worked at a publicly traded company, you've led finance, as I alluded to earlier. Now you're leading legal. What do you think the untapped opportunities are? Like, obviously, there are things that are exciting, but just what are the untapped opportunities from your perspective in AI for legal
Yeah,
teams?
yeah, for legal teams, I think one of the areas that is untapped is almost more the ability to kind of set your guardrails or things you care about and have the AI
Mm,
help you figure out where you need to go within the business to find those. Um,
mm,
like using it's almost like the opposite of what DataGrail does, right? Like, which is you're
yeah,
going in and looking at the connections, right? But one of them like is like Cedar's a highly regulated business, right? And I'll use this kind of an example of what I would have liked, right? Is somebody used Claude to pull they fed it a bunch of information about the business from, information available, and then ask it, what are all the laws that Cedar is subject to?
mm,
And that was interesting because it went one way, right? It was like, and it wasn't, it was kind of like it was an interesting thing to see what came back. It was some
how
right, some
accurate
wrong.
was it? I'm curious, like what that.
I would say it did a great job of identifying laws that could be applicable. I say
Mm,
could. It did a very, I actually think it did a very fair job there. What it struggled with is application of the law, right? Like when it came down to like that next layer of a couple of things that I identified, I was like, oh, nope, we're not subject to that because of, we don't fit within the definitions, like certain definitions. So that was
mm,
where, could you refine that from a query? Yes. But then taking that back of, hey, we're subject, like if you almost like work that one direction, right? You're subject to these laws. Help me understand how those laws overlap with my business. That
right.
feels to me like a problem that machine learning and AI should be able to help me solve,
Yeah.
from like a legal and a compliance standpoint, because guardrail, like sort of mapping your controls, is an area that is really important both for regulatory kind of compliance, and often, your legal department or your compliance department or both are responsible
Yeah.
for doing that. And it's requires a lot of support from, those deep within the business to help you identify and ask the right questions. And like it's been an area where I've been noodling and been saying I'd love to see something in that space, because
Yeah.
it's an area from a maturity perspective. The companies don't go there because it has historically been a very manual process to figure
Yeah.
that out, track them. And so kind of noodling that from both sides. It's like a place I'd love to see the technology go because I think it's possible.
Yeah. We've taken that position. So actually, Vera, which was announced yesterday, it has really like a policy engine that can be tailored to the business, but it is specific to privacy. So to your point,
Yeah.
you could ask questions related to which privacy laws are applicable to my business, and then it will be tailored to that scenario.
Okay.
But yeah, it's specific to privacy, so it doesn't go into other areas of businesses. But yeah, that's an interesting concept. I'm actually surprised someone hasn't addressed that because to your point, how you would actually figure that out is quite a lot of work. And you'd have to have deep context of the business in order to get to the right outcome.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the tools are just getting like in a way, like I said, 12 to 18 months ago, I don't think the tools could take the business and really do a great job of ingesting to understand the laws
Yeah,
that were applicable. Really, that was a very human task. They're now much better at that
yeah,
stage, which makes me think maybe you can then use that to go the other way. Now, it does
yeah,
create kind of an interesting my chief product officer and I have had this debate. She describes it as the bots are botting, but like one of the, the nuances of that is you've also then integrated an AI kind of both ways, and it's like is kind of one AI talking to another, and
right,
where's the sort of human check that
right,
all
right,
made
right, right,
sense.
right, yeah. Which I mean, guidance, judgment, and really like taste to a degree start to
Yeah.
play pretty big roles in decisions. So shifting gears a little bit, I think the other area that I was interested in, just because you've worked in so many different functions and worked across functions, how do you think legal teams or legal leaders can better partner with product and ops and the engineering groups who are trying to ultimately drive business value? Like how do you think about that, and have you seen anything work particularly well?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you what I think they've like recently been asking for, and I've been sort of noodling through. Um, Really, especially in a highly regulated environment, product I think has historically kind of said, "Hey, we understand we need to partner really closely with legal or legal and compliance so that we're getting that advice on the ground as we're building." There is somewhat of a generational shift in terms of, well, and it was also coupled with, I think, sort of where we are in the economic cycle. And other thing is that like legal is always a limited resource. So there's this tension between
Mm,
we like to partner, we want the advice. How do we get farther before we need to rope you in? So that becomes like
yeah,
the
yeah. So
the
bring you in
ask.
earlier in the process, but do you have the resources to be able to do that?
Yeah, and so how do we provide almost more accessibility towards prior guidance, risk frameworks, and other kind of could be AI-enabled tooling that helps product folks get more like input from legal without necessarily having to come and say, "Hey, I need an hour of your week." Right?
Right,
How do they kind of
right.
get farther before they need to come? And that's been like to be honest, one of the jobs to be done that we've really been focused on for the last 6 months of what are the different ways we can attack that problem.
Yeah,
And some of it is also like in a traditional sort of legal team framework of, hey, we give advice, but maybe our advice is sitting on a Jira board where it's not an open Jira ticket, right?
right, right.
So, we've had this confluence of, and right now our product teams are sort of operating in a distributed model. It allows us to move very quickly.
Yeah,
Challenge of that is, someone has a great idea in a meeting, and then we get three tickets that they don't all know they're at. Like different, it kind
right.
of percolates through the business, and then we get three tickets on similar topics that pop up. So how do we give that transparency or say, to person A, hey, we just answered that question for, B and C over here. Let's make that available to you, or almost like, hey, at Surface, you just asked a question that we've already answered very recently. Here is the advice to kind of get them started.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where we've been focused on it. And that's where I think AI can be really helpful. But it comes, this is, one of the things of the challenge that's in that we're kind of an existing business who's been operating for a while. We have existing tools and processes in
yeah,
place. And, rethinking some of those takes resources too.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
benefits I think you kind of get of like right now, if I'm building a company, I get to like build with like the existence of these things in mind, which
yeah,
is it is it's transparently it's a plus for them, right? Like you get to
yeah,
make some of
yeah,
these
yeah. There's
decisions.
advantages of being later in that respect. Yeah,
Yeah, right. And I love operations and scaling, but it was like the way that AI has matured and kind of hit the forefront of like, back in 2022 when I took this role and really started building out, this was on yeah, people were talking about it, but nothing was really
not to this level.
not
Yeah,
functionable and usable. And we knew it was coming, but the rate of change there has been just so rapid that
Yeah,
like I was like, would I have made different decisions in 2022 had I
probably.
known?
Yeah.
Maybe
With
yes, but
yeah.
the tools weren't there to meet that
Right,
need,
right,
right?
right, 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 right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So just the another area that I see people challenged with because there are so many priorities. So what is a priority? Of just how do you think about prioritizing investments, like in terms of, when your team comes to you with something, they're looking to do it. Um, and I'm sure there are other, to your point, maybe there is something on a Jira board that, maybe a technology could help with. How do you think about like the prioritization of investment in AI? Because I think the ROI is obviously can be exciting, but sometimes also hard to figure out where you prioritize.
Yeah, and that was the part like a year ago we sort of surveyed the fields and to be honest, I felt like with some crafty use we could kind of our existing tooling got us pretty far.
Yeah, yeah,
I think now some of the tooling out there is actually a step function change. And right. And
yeah.
so that's probably been the thing that's changed as my teams come is they've kind of said, hey, you know what? Rather than almost think of the tool is almost like we have a better understanding of what AI is capable of. So,
Mm,
focusing on, how do you end up without avoiding AI tool creep? Is
yeah,
I'm not buying tools. I'm looking at AI use cases. Where do I think we need to boost or change how we operate using AI? Well, with understanding what's capable, and then go find the right tools for our use.
mm,
Because I think if you're always just looking at, oh, I'm going to go buy a tool, like I'm
yeah,
not a go buy a tool person. I will
yeah,
almost,
yeah,
if
yeah.
someone says they want to come buy a tool, I was like, go make your business case of why you
Yeah,
need
correct,
a tool.
correct, exactly.
Right. And so I'm not somebody who just buys a tool because it's hot and I think it'll help. I think it'll help me. It's almost like I
Yeah,
almost want to understand the lay of the land of the tools available. How
yeah,
could we use them in our business and then purchase that way? So that's sort of my always my gentle push.
yeah,
And then I think with that, like what we found is and also our engineering team, they recently purchased some new AI tools that we could leverage. So it's kind of been
cool.
one of those where there are, but there's also a couple I really now want. I know the use case for, and they're not part of an existing budget. But,
Yeah,
one of them is talking to the CFO. They also want that tool, right? It's a big
yeah,
boost for them.
yeah,
So, do we each need to do our own? Not necessarily, but like starting to say, hey, I actually have some use cases that I think we're not able to hit from the existing tooling
yeah,
that are the step function. So that's sort of how I think about it is like, what do I want to accomplish with it? Then
yeah.
what do I buy?
I think the use cases point you made there is very interesting. I think that's smart. I think yeah, I mean, buying a tool because you should just have a tool is not the right approach, obviously. But just going back to the use case, it's like then you're actually addressing the problem you're trying to solve. Like, what is the job to be done?
Yeah,
Versus just like this is a thing I think can solve problems. Which there's a lot of
exactly.
that, right? Like people can get caught up in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So last kind of question. So, and you've shared a few of these, but just, are there any pitfalls you think people should try to avoid or things that you've experienced where you're like, okay, I wish I did that differently, specific to kind of adopting AI or just like legal tech?
Yeah. I mean, I think pitfalls, one of them we just hit, right? Which is buy
Yeah,
a tool because
yeah,
it sounds
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
I
exactly.
think, I think if you go to any of these kind of sessions on AI tools, everyone says, don't sign a 3-year agreement on your AI tool because the world's
Yes,
going to
yeah,
change, right? I'm
exactly.
going to kind of almost ignore those. There's like, those are just table
Yeah,
stakes.
yeah, yeah,
I said, keeping in mind what you really want to do. And the other kind of pitfall or thing I've been really conscious of is just because someone else says this thing is amazing, is it amazing for what you need as a business? Like it's almost like a
right,
second order question that I've
right.
thought a lot about. Like, for example, Cedar's enterprise healthcare, right? Like, so we don't have volume, right? So some of the AI tools that are really designed around helping solve volume contracting issues, they're
Yeah, you're
less
not doing
like
the volume
it's not
necessary
really the
to
volume
use it.
thing,
Yeah,
right? And so like, my advice to people out there is to really, really think about what are the things that your team is spending the most hours of the day doing, and what are the ways that you can like help, reduce redundancy, make this simpler, save time, all this, but they have to be tailored to your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that like really has changed how I think about AI, right? And so that's a
Mm.
pitfall because it's, you know, it's easy to say, oh, I went to this conference and everyone was talking about this tool. And I'm like, but I don't need that. I don't
Yeah,
have
the
those
problem
issues.
isn't big enough for you to solve. The
Yeah.
investment of time and money is probably not worth it.
Yeah, and like you and I have talked about this too, is, you know, the privacy footprint of Cedar is different than a company that operates
Of
in
course.
150 countries, right? Like,
Yeah.
so our,
Yeah.
and, you know, healthcare is kind of its own thing, right? Like, and so that is, you really do have to work around what it makes sense for your business.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming up on time, so I want to be respectful of folks, but thank you so much, Vanessa. I enjoy our conversations every time we chat, and I ran you off script a couple points there too. So, but you know, no surprise you filled in there. But yeah, I hope folks enjoyed the session, and for comments, we'll definitely you know, respond to those shortly. And as mentioned last time, we do these roughly every 2 to 3 weeks. So keep an eye out for the next one. But thank you again. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.